first thing that I want to address is organization. So whenever I talk to students about organization, I always see that maybe about a quarter of them would identify as being organized individuals. So what does it mean to be organized? Maybe you're great at organizing your books, and maybe you organize them alphabetical. Maybe you organize them by year. Maybe you organize them by color because you like the aesthetic appeal. The library system uses the Dewey Decimal System. Why? Because organization makes it faster and more efficient to achieve things. Organization arranges things in time or space, and it's helpful, and our brains expect things to be organized. So organization is more than just taking patterns in your speech. It's a major life skill, and it's important as you develop here in college that you develop healthy and good organizational skills. And one way to do that is to understand the nature of organization when it comes to your presentations and your speeches. So after you've selected your topics and you've done a little bit of preliminary research, what you'll see happening is that there are some main points that sort of emerge. These are your key ideas, and these are your main themes. And ultimately, using your thesis or your purpose as a guide. So last time I had you write down the specific purpose of my presentation is to. So if you write down, let's say that I was giving a speech on cyberspace. The specific purpose of my presentation is to inform my audience about cyberspace. Then you want to choose about 3 to 5 main ideas to focus on. So maybe in my preliminary research, I found out that there are 3 important things to talk about when it comes to cyberspace: social media, internet, and access. Okay, so there's my main themes, 3 main things that I want to talk about. Each main point, each main idea should consist of just one thing. So you shouldn't focus on the internet and what it is and internet access and social media, for example. Those each need to be their individual points. There's something in public speaking called the primacy recency effect, and this is actually a psychological concept. But the idea is that human beings remember the first and the last thing the best. And so it's important to think about what you're doing your presentation for. Who is it for? It's for your audience. You want them to learn from you when you do these presentations. And so we want to focus on the beginning and the end. And then finally, it's important to have parallel form. So as you develop these ideas, you'll begin with just a sketch, a couple words, like I just said there, internet access, right? So after you have developed these ideas, you have to decide how you're going to arrange them and why you're going to arrange them that way. And we have different types and functions of organizational arrangements. Topical is just like it sounds. It's taking the major topics and finding a rationale. So maybe I need to define internet to make sense of what social media is. And then I talk about internet access and how it differs around the globe. So I've given a rationale there. And it's very important that when you have a topical arrangement in your preview of main points, which we'll talk about, it's important that you explain how and why you have them arranged. Sometimes individuals choose to do chronological arrangements when it comes to informative type speeches. So chronological means, can you guess? I'll give you a second to think about it. CHRON is a prefix in Latin for time. So these are in order of time. So maybe you're giving a speech in history. You're talking about the history of airplanes, for example. That would be chronological. That would make sense. A lot of times, demonstration speeches and presentations are chronological. So if I'm talking about how to bake a cake, for example, I would use a chronological arrangement. Spatial arrangements are arrangements that sort of pattern a presentation based on space. And so an excellent example of this is when you are giving a tour of the campus, for example. Or you might be giving a tour of a house as a real estate agent. You design things based on how people will experience them or how you want them to experience it. So if I were giving a presentation to a student who I was hoping would come to Penn State, it would look a lot different than the presentation I would give to the employee. If I wanted to impress a potential employee, I might show off our library and our labs and the equipment that we have and what we have access to in the database. A student, I would probably start with our student union because it looks really awesome and I'd want them to see where financial aid is, etc. So these are the main 3 organizational patterns that you'll focus on for your informative speech. And we'll come back to the rest of these soon. We'll come back to them when we do our persuasive speeches. So after you've developed the main themes, which is step 1, and then you've developed the pattern that you'd like to use to arrange them, it's important that you write them out in full sentence declarative form. So there's a inclination for college students to want to ask a question as the main point. So what is the internet? Wrong. We are not here to have you ask us questions as audience members. So you need to develop your main points in full sentence declarative form. So instead of what is the internet, you could say the internet has several definitions. And that's your full sentence main point. And then the supporting evidence that you give all falls in line under that. Okay? So when you develop your main sentences, they all need to be relevant and fit back into the main purpose of the presentation. It's very important that you think about it that way. So the final thing to sort of focus on is these major principles that you see here on the screen. The first is unity. All of the points need to make sense within the overall framework of the main purpose of the speech, which is what we just talked about. They also need to be coherent. You need to have points that have the same amount of weight. And so if you think about this, when you're building your outline, you'll need to make sure that you have the same amount of page space roughly for each main point. If you have a quarter page for one point and 2 pages for the other, they're not going to be balanced. So then you'll need to shift them in some way. So something to think about. So what I'd like you all to do is to pause here and work on your main points, your full sentence main points and your ideas until you have them where you want them. And after that, move on to the next part of this organization workshop.